Hello, friends. Today I am joined by Lyndsey Mimnagh, who is a homeschool mom of four and the founder of Treehouse Schoolhouse. Before motherhood, Lyndsey had a career in children's ministry and special needs education. Her home education centers around living books and ideas, hands-on learning, nature exploration, and biblical discipleship. Lyndsey shares experiences and home education inspiration through her Instagram and blog. She also creates curriculum and resources for family around the world. And I am so delighted to get to chat with you today, Lyndsey. So, here at the beginning, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and how you got started homeschooling?
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here. I'm Lyndsey. I have four children. My youngest is three. My oldest just turned 11 last week. And we've been homeschooling the whole journey. I have a very unique story that actually, before I was a parent at all, I was a private nanny, which turned into a homeschooling position. So the mother asked if I would homeschool her two children. And so I started learning about homeschooling and falling in love with this lifestyle before I was even a mother. So, along with that, I also served in children's ministry for many years, full time as my career. So now I took my passion for home education, my passion for biblical discipleship and children's ministry. And as my journey in my own motherhood and homeschooling began, I began creating resources for my own family that kind of brought both of those worlds together and have the unique opportunity to share them with you and with the world. And so I also have a blog and create resources, curriculum and different things that really focus on connection, family connection, biblical discipleship, and a lot of nature, which is one of my passions as well.
Before we started this episode, we were talking about our respective families, and my family currently is 9 to 19, essentially. And so I just am excited to see what the next few years have for you and your kids. Like, you're right on that cusp of the golden era of motherhood where everyone can
Yes.
bathe themselves and get their own snacks, buckle themselves in their car. It's great.
Yep. Yeah, we're already seeing a taste of that, especially since we do have older ones that really take a lot of responsibility in helping the younger ones. And so just even in the last year, we've tasted that freedom, and my husband and I are starting to dream about more traveling, and they're just more flexible. We've recently been traveling, and I can put all four kids in one room and shut the door and say, okay, just figure it out, go to bed. And it actually works. It's like no more pack and plays and strollers and diapers. And so it is sad to grieve the last season, but also we have a lot of excitement and hope about what's next.
Yeah. Each season of homeschooling and motherhood is beautiful in its own way. Well, over these kind of years and these changing seasons of homeschooling, have you noticed that your approach to homeschooling or sort of your philosophy of education has grown or changed at all over time?
Oh, definitely. So when I was working for the family before I was a mother, I was kind of, thrown into this position of having to figure out homeschooling, and being educated in the public school system myself. I sort of just replicated that at their home. And it's also, I think, what the mother knew and what she kind of expected and wanted. And so there were multiple reasons why we did that. But as my confidence grew in that position, I was there for about 4 years, and I took the child from first grade through elementary. I changed even within that role, and she started to see the passion come alive when we would do things differently, when we didn't have to stick to a workbook, and we would get outside and we would take his schoolwork to the treehouse, or to a park, and we would do different things. And so then when I became a mother and I started having the preschool age, I got really excited again about being a home educator, because there had been this time lapse. And I'm like, oh yay, it's time to start putting the alphabet charts on the wall and make sure my kids sit still and do this work. And that didn't last very long before I remembered, like, wait, there's more to this, and it can look different. And so at that point, I started really diving into the different philosophies of education and trying to pray about and think about what matters to me as a person, what matters to my husband, what does education mean to me, and really just started from scratch and kind of took my own personal journey in public education, my career path in education, and put all of that to the side and started fresh. And so that was kind of a scary place of like, I'm starting from scratch, trying to put everything behind me, kind of that phrase, de-school my own self, to figure out what I care about and what I think is most important in education. So um, it turns out I did not replicate a public school system at home. And we also delayed formal education at that point until around age 6. So yeah, as time has gone on, even now, I look around at our education maybe every few months and I go, oh, we're different now. I feel more confident. I feel more free. I'm not so worried about checking all the boxes. And so it is a journey, but I think every homeschool parent, as they grow, feels more comfortable in their skin doing it and feels more, just confident in their own direction, even if it doesn't look like the next person or read exactly like even the person that you're modeling your home education after, like, like Charlotte Mason or something. Like, even that, I feel more confident kind of carving my own path, taking from the different philosophies what I believe in and what I agree with, but we're not all supposed to look the same.
I think that's one of the true gifts of being a long-term homeschool mom, where you can just develop that comfort level of being in your own skin, being your own unique homeschool family, right? Not comparing yourself to another homeschooler or a homeschool friend or a homeschool influencer online, right? But
Right.
just having that confidence to know, you know what? It's okay. We're going to change things up, or we're going to do it this way that works for our unique family. And I really love that. I've definitely seen that in my own life this year. Our youngest son was diagnosed with leukemia last fall. So the school year has looked completely different than any other homeschool year before. Our plans have definitely drastically shifted and changed. But because I have all of these years that I can look back and I can see there's time, I guess,
Yeah.
too. Like, there's time. It doesn't all have to happen at once. I'm much more confident in the choices I've made this year, even when they're very different from choices I would typically make. And just to know that it's going to be okay. Like, we have time and we can rest, and ultimately in God's faithfulness with our kids. But I love hearing how in your own homeschool, you've seen that as well, just growing in that confidence.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of it is the life stuff that happens. In the past year, we built a house, we've moved multiple times, we've had 4 children. Like, there have been huge, what some people may look in and say distractions or setbacks, but I don't see it that way because I really do view education as all of life. And the things that your children are gaining because of your situation that they would have never otherwise gotten to experience, or, even emotional things, leaning on God. These are all things. It's not just about reading and writing and math. It's about our hearts and it's about our connection with our family and what it looks like to cope with trauma and be patient and all of these things. And so I view it as that too. And I think the more that we can see education as a whole person, our children as whole people, and we are developing all of these things, we can rest in these seasons and say, all of this is education. It's okay when you have a baby and you don't sit down and do formal school for 6 months. They're learning something that they would not learn if you sent them to school. They wouldn't be experiencing that home life, and that is going to apply to their future so much more. So I think that's a huge part of the long-term homeschooling mother, that, to sit down with someone who's done it a really long time. That's often what I hear is, it's okay, just rest. They're learning so much.
Yeah. Oh man, that's one of the great parts of homeschooling for sure. Are there any other things about homeschooling that are maybe just something particular that's a favorite part of homeschooling for you or your family?
Well, my husband and I are unique in some of the things that we're gifted in or things that we're passionate about, just like really every person. And I feel like it's this really beautiful opportunity to pass those things down to our children in a very intentional way. And that's the other thing that makes every homeschool family so unique, because it's a marrying of the parents and what we're passionate about, what we're called to, mixed with what makes our children come alive. And so you put all of these personalities and these passions together in one unit, and you help grow those things, and you're going to have a result that another family is not going to have. So I think it's just really fun. Like, I'm a creative and an artist. My husband is a woodworker. So these are things that we integrate into our homeschooling. I think that that's one of my favorite things, that we get to see those things even in our children. What are my children inclined to, and how can we help those things grow? So I think it's just the freedoms too. Like, year round, we homeschool year round because I feel like we adapt every day to the things that come into our life with the weather or with, my kids' grandparents. My parents just were in town, so we didn't technically do school for a couple of those days, but instead they were baking with grandma. My sons were learning chess with my dad. We were bird watching together. And so I still consider all of that learning, but it's these freedoms that we have to really lean into the things that life brings us and let all of it be learning.
And the things that you and your husband are, bringing to the dinner table, or, oh, guys, I'm so excited about this, are uniquely your family. And I was just thinking, like, you probably never have the same conversations we have at our table. My husband
Right.
is a bridge engineer, and he's been known to bring like blueprints and things to the table and discuss, various design facets and things like that. And or I'll bring Shakespeare or whatever. And I
Right.
just think it's really fun to kind of just go all in what makes your family kind of unique and the way God's made you. And that's just kind of a fun family culture that we're developing as we are living life together, both educationally, formally, and just around the dinner table.
Absolutely.
But of course, we know homeschooling also has challenges. So, what have been some of the challenges of homeschooling, and how have you sought to overcome those challenges?
I think for me, I am a starter that's like, I'm a visionary, I'm a big picture person. I love to sit down with my planner and look ahead and get excited about the new year. And I'm really bad at the details and at the follow through. And so for me, I get burned out really quickly when I'm like an all or nothing girl. I don't know if you can relate to that, but I'm like, I want every day to feel really big and magical. And like, I want the table to be beautiful, and I want to light the candles, and I want to bring the snacks, and I want every child to be super engaged. And when early on in my journey, when a day didn't look like that, I would feel like a failure. And so I feel like I have had to learn that there are different levels of what a homeschooling day can look like. And so there might be some of those days where I'm completely prepared. I have, the schoolrooms organized. I've looked over my plans. I have a project in mind. The kids are excited. No one is sick. You know what I'm saying? And we have this beautiful day. And that might be like 25% of our homeschool days. That's even shooting high. And then we have like the middle day that's like, I know that this is a day where we're going to get to our core work that the kids mostly can do independently. And then what I can commit is like playing a game, a board game that I don't have to prepare for, and doing one chapter of our read aloud. And that is an okay day as well. And I've had to come to terms with, I think the way I've overcome this all or nothing, not wanting to do the details thing, is knowing already ahead of time that there are different facets of what a day could look like, and they're all success. And then even at the basic level is like the kids are just sort of going to do their thing, and they're going to self-educate today, and I'm going to manage what other chaos we have going on in our life, and I'm going to choose to look at what they're doing and the books they're reading and the games they're playing and the things they're discussing and playing, and realize that that's also education, and change my mindset that all of it is education and that they're learning, and it doesn't have to all look like that 25%.
I love that. It's kind of like, with dinner, one meal might be a really amazing pot roast with all the fixings. Another dinner is like cheese toast and carrot sticks. And then maybe there's a like free for all, guys, just find some leftovers in the
Right.
fridge. We kind of have these ranges. And just because they're not all the Christmas morning feast or, the Thanksgiving dinner feast, it doesn't mean it's a bad meal, right? It's just different meals look different at different times. And it's kind of like a homeschool day. They're not
I
all
love
going to be
that.
Thanksgiving.
I love that. That's actually really, really cool. And to think about it, like I love nourishing my children with good food. So this is a great example too, because the fourth option is to give them, packaged convenience food and, Pop Tarts and whatever. And that I do believe is not good. So that would be like, okay, the fourth option would be like, I am just putting them in front of a screen all day. And knowing that that's not what I do, then I can look at these other three options and say, no, like you are successful. They are learning because you have set their atmosphere to be learning. And I think that that's really key, because I don't want to say like any day is education, like they can just do whatever they want and they're learning. Because I really do believe that it's about, we need to steward our homes well. We need to steward our children's minds well. We need to spread a feast of good books and of living ideas, but we don't have to be on and sitting with them for 6 hours a day to do that. We can offer that in our homes and in their normal routines and in their rhythms, and they can learn to educate in their everyday life when that is their atmosphere and that is their structure.
So good. Such a good reminder. Well, Lindsay, earlier you mentioned you had grandparents in town. The kids were playing chess. They were doing baking with grandma, all these things. And these are some of those things that we may not think of in the homeschool day. They don't come in a textbook.
Right.
But those life skills really matter, right? So, how do you and your family prioritize passing on those life skills to your kids?
I mean, I don't have any sort of like curriculum or structure for it, but it's definitely just something that's a big priority in our minds that we're thinking through. Like, um, we have a couple of rhythms in our life that lean towards this. For example, certain kids help cook dinner certain nights of the week. We try to make all of our meals, open and slow to invite the kids in, whoever's around to jump up and help cook. My husband is really passionate about financial freedom and financial stewardship. So he has a whole thing going on with them every week where they do certain responsibilities throughout the week and they get paid at the end of the week, and then they have to give a certain percentage back so that they're learning about, bills. And so it's this whole structure that he does. And then like when we were building the house, rather than it just being like, that's daddy's thing, we were continually bringing the kids over, letting them meet the contractors and letting them see this process, even in the design work, even with my business. I think it's just a mentality of inviting them in, continually inviting them in, and just having conversation, talking to them about these real life things, taking them with us to the grocery store, showing my daughter the list, saying, we're on a budget, so this is what we need to do, and we're going to do math while we're in here. All of these things just to bring them in and to realize that that is a big chunk of their education, and I consider that school.
Yeah, no, I love that. It makes me think of actually my very first podcast guest. It was before I knew I was going to have a podcast. I just sort of really wanted to talk to my friend, and it started this whole thing. And he was talking about budgeting for homeschooling families was his specific topic, but they do something called a bank of dad, which kind of reminds me of what you were talking
Yes.
about with your kids. So yeah, that's great. Well, you mentioned some of these rhythms you have in your family. And I know this is something you talk about a lot, these sort of daily, weekly, monthly, yearly rhythms that really define your family life, your homeschool. So I was wondering why you kind of think about it that way. And then what does that actually look like in real life? Like, what do these seasonal rhythms, how does that translate into your homeschool?
Yeah, I feel like I'm, as I mentioned, I'm a big idea person. I'm an idealist, and I sit down, often and kind of think about my whole life. And I'm like, I want to be the mom who fill in the blank. I want our homeschool to look like this. I want these skills for my children, or I want our marriage to do this. And I feel like the only way I can accomplish these things is to work backwards and to kind of set things in motion. But I'm also like a free spirit, and I don't want to have boxes to check and like exact schedules. So I really like this idea of rhythms where if I look at our day and I say, I really want my children to take ownership of home care, for example, well, that's just not going to happen without some intentionality. And so we put rhythms in our day that train them in caring for their home, in so we have certain parts of our day where every day they have morning responsibilities and this is what they do. And in the evening, I also, from working with special needs children and just children in general and toddlers especially, anytime where you just pull them away from what they're doing and say, all of a sudden now we're going to clean the room on a random Tuesday, but it's not something you do in a rhythm, they're going to fight you. And I've just learned that when you have rhythms that your children expect, and I'm a big proponent of visual schedules, it really helps my children to see this is what we're doing today, this is what is expected, especially when they're younger. And I just feel like these rhythms help set us up for success, to help children know what their day looks like and what's expected of them, and then helping my own self. So, like I said, I can get off track with just vision, vision, vision. But if I set some things into practice with my own self, and I juggle a lot of things being a homeschooling mother, caring for a home, having a business. And so it's these rhythms that I really believe help accomplish these goals in my home. So for a daily rhythm, our daily rhythm looks like most homeschool families, I think, where we get up, we do our morning responsibilities, we have family discipleship around breakfast, we enjoy morning time, which incorporates all of my children at the same time. My older children then break for their independent work while I kind of do some preschool, kindergarten play and reading with my little ones. And then we do read alouds over lunch. And then I have my afternoon work block. And then in the evening, dinner, after dinner chores, time with dad, and bed. And so it's just this rhythm that feels the same every day, but we can take a longer stretch and say, we're going to go outside for 3 hours instead of our normal 1 hour because it's beautiful outside. We're going to shift lessons to the afternoon. We can do that, but it's just this beautiful rhythm that my children know this is a typical day and they're not going to fight me on this schedule. And then seasonally, I loved, even before I homeschooled, I loved the beauty of the seasons. We actually moved from Florida to North Carolina because I wanted to experience the seasons. And with children, I really loved this idea of every fall, these are the things that we do that means it's fall to the children. You know, you go apple picking, you make apple pie, you collect leaves and you do tree identification. And so all year round, I was already sort of doing these seasonal rhythms with my children because they were making memories and they were just really fun and engaging. And so then I developed Treehouse Nature Study, which is our most well-known curriculum. And it's basically taking nature study through the seasons and studying different themes for each season through the lens of beauty subjects like poetry and art study, really good living books, hands-on projects, and full-blown science and nature study. And so it's made for the whole family, and that's what we use for morning time year round. And it's really fun to revisit those themes year after year in the different seasons, and the kids remember, I remember when we learned about birds last year. And as they're growing, they're going deeper and in their understanding. But you can bring in your 3-year-old, you can bring in your 11-year-old. They can both learn things about birds at the same time, but going deeper. So that we're also fostering that family connection. So that's one of my favorite things as well.
I love that. And I did not know that we were both North Carolinians.
Oh,
So
I didn't either.
we live near Raleigh, and I might be biased, but I do love North Carolina, our seasons, our weather, our wide range. You can go to the beach or the mountains or anything
Yes,
in between. It's a pretty great state.
absolutely.
Um,
I totally agree.
you mentioned having a visual schedule, and I wanted to just ask a clarification about that. How do you set that up for your non-readers? Are you putting like pictures, or how does that work with before you have a reader?
Yeah, so we actually developed this resource in my shop, and we have a watercolor illustrator who created a little image next to each thing. So for breakfast, there's a little image of eggs on a plate, and then it will say breakfast, and it's in like really plain print letters, so that as they're starting to develop. So I have a 3 and 5-year-old who aren't completely reading yet, but they recognize the breakfast plate and the bee, and they say, oh, that's breakfast. And as we use these over and over and over, they recognize, oh, the tree means it's time to play outside. So it has both. Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to check that out and put that link in the show notes. Well, Lyndsey, one of the things I think is really fun to ask a mom who's been homeschooling for a while, and I think it'll be interesting to you too, because to hear your perspective, because you're homeschooling your own children, but you also had this different kind of experience homeschooling and for another family. So I was curious, if you were talking to a new homeschool mom, like what would you want to share with her? What would you want to say? What piece of advice or encouragement would you give?
Not be what you expect, but I really feel like I've learned that it's really important to take care of ourselves as women in this journey, and that it is a really long journey. It's not a sprint. And so there's 2 parts to this. One is what we already mentioned earlier, to try to see the big picture. When you have seasons where you're not homeschooling in the capacity that you wished that you were because of life circumstances, or your child is really struggling with a certain subject, and so you just take a break for a while, or you fumble through multiple curriculums in 3 months or something. Those things stress people out so much in the early years of motherhood and of homeschooling. But I can tell you it's okay. And in the big picture, at the end of the day, they're going to be fine. And you are going to look back and say, why did I stress so much about that over the first few years? So to try to see the big picture, to realize it's a journey, but then back to taking care of ourselves. I really feel like we don't talk about this enough, that this is like a 20-year journey or more for most homeschool moms. If you start at the beginning and you graduate your children and you have multiple children, it's a huge chunk of your life. And I really believe that I see a lot of moms completely drowning in this stage because they don't prioritize their own spiritual growth, their own friendships, their marriage, their own physical health. their own mental space. I see moms really crumbling in anxiety or depression or isolation. And that really is not serving yourself or your family well. And I really feel like when moms burn out in this journey, a lot of that could be saved if they just protected their own self in the journey. And so for me personally, it's been a process, and it's not always possible in one way or another because you're not sleeping all night or you don't have the finances to get childcare, all these things. But as my journey has gone on, I've realized that a few things that have really helped me is number one, schooling year round so that I can give myself a break on the days that it just isn't going to work for me that day. I wake up, I'm not feeling well, or I have a girlfriend that's in need, and there's a way that I can, not do school that day and spend time with my friend. And it's just having this idea that we are a woman, we are a whole person, just like our children are whole people, and we need to care for our whole selves, our relationships, our spirits, our bodies. We need to prioritize exercise. We need to prioritize making nourishing food, all of these things so that we can do this for the long term and not giving into guilt when it doesn't look like, like I mentioned at the beginning, the 25% every single day, because we need to also protect our own selves in this journey.
I am really glad you said that. I think that's so important for moms to hear. My friend Jessica actually has a guest post on this topic. By the time this episode comes out, it will be live on my blog. So I'll make sure to link that up in the show notes.
Awesome.
And I was also thinking just, going back to our previous conversation about seasons and rhythms and things like that. It's also okay if there's a time maybe taking care of your body means like training for a half marathon or doing an exercise class. That's been my life in the past. This season, taking care of my body looks like going out for like a 15-minute walk when I can.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay too, because sometimes we set up expectations for ourselves like, well, I used to be able to do this, or this is what, taking care of myself looked like at this season. So it always has to look like that.
Right.
And to be okay with it changing. Sometimes it looks like a nap, right? Sometimes there's many different ways that it can look, but it's so very important. And I think also part of that, the relationship between husband and wife, right? For homeschool parents to not put their relationship on the back burner for the sake of like, okay, gotta get this homeschool stuff done, gotta do the planning, gotta get this done, just to make sure that that is at the front of mind too. And sometimes, it may look like something in the homeschool being set aside for a day to prioritize something that at the end of the day is still going to be there when the kids graduate, right?
Exactly.
Really, you're still going to have your spouse around. So make sure you still like each other.
Exactly.
Well, here at the end, Lyndsey, I'm going to ask you the questions that I ask all of my guests. And so the first question is just, what have you been reading lately?
I have been reading this really excellent book. I'm going through it really slowly. It's called The Rest of God, and it's all about restoring the Sabbath, and not just a Sabbath like a day, but in our heart and in our minds. I personally have struggled with just being go, go, go on, and not learning how to personally rest. So even this answer of taking care of ourselves is out of my own mistakes and burnout. And so this book has been it's one of those that you chew on. So I read a little bit, pray about it a long time, journal for a few days, and then read a little bit more. So it's called The Rest of God by Mark Buchanan. It's highly recommend if you feel like you really want to understand what God intends for women and anyone for resting in him and living from a place of rest, not working so that you can rest.
One of my very favorite passages is in the book of Hebrews, where it's looking back at all of the rest in the Old Testament, right? The seventh day rest, the land of Israel was going to be a rest, but not quite yet, and it says there is yet a rest for the people of God, and just how all of this is pointing towards this glorious promise we have of an eternal rest. Yes. I don't know if you know Erin Lynham. She has the Nat Theo podcast, but I think she has her next book that's coming out is going to be on the topic of rest as well. So I'm looking forward to that one. Yeah.
Awesome.
Maybe we should just like have a whole really focus on rest. Maybe homeschool moms really need to hear this. This is an unintended theme. I was not expecting this to be a theme coming out of our chat, but it's an important one. I'm
preaching to the choir. So
yes, we all need that one. All right, final question is, what is your best tip for helping the homeschool day run more smoothly?
Well, let's see. If we're going to do just like a fun practical tip, one of my most recent favorites is I have these bento boxes that I bought for when my kids do our wild and free, our nature group every Friday. But I started packing them in the morning for my kids, even when we weren't leaving. So I would set them all on the counter. I pack their lunches. I pack my own lunch, or I at least in my head know, okay, I'm warming that up. And then in the lunch crazy hour, when I'm trying to, we're transitioning from this to this, and then I've got my 3-year-old doing this and that, that I can just say, everybody go grab your lunchbox and go sit at the table for a read aloud. Because I feel like it eliminates like 30 minutes of everybody pulling stuff out, stuff getting everywhere, the kitchen becoming a wreck. And it sort of like it was disrupting our day. I love cooking a slow breakfast and dinner together, but lunch was just like the crazy time. So it's been really nice to just pack these ahead and the kids grab them at lunchtime and I sit down and keep moving along with our schoolwork. So just a little practical tip that lately has been really helping.
That is a really great tip. Yeah, I kind of like now being in the stage where I don't do lunch. The kids all take care of lunch themselves. I like this
It's
stage of
nice.
motherhood.
Yeah, even the 3-year-old, I'll pack her lunch, or I do have them help me pack the lunches. But it was like a light bulb that went off. Like I don't have to stop in the middle of my day and, have 30 minutes of disruption. We can just keep trucking.
That is awesome. I love that tip. Well, Lyndsey, where can people find you all around the internet? And also, I think you have a special resource for Homeschool Conversations listeners.
Yeah, you can find me at treehouseschoolhouse.com. That's where I host my blog and my shop. You can also find us on YouTube, where we have lots of videos showing inside our curriculum, but then also fun, like lifestyle ones of a day in the life of a homeschool kindergartner or a tour of my homeschool room, fun things like that. And then on Instagram, where I'm super active, treehouse_schoolhouse. And if you see something that you like in the shop, if you're interested in those daily rhythm cards or a nature study or something else, you can get 15% off your order with Homeschool Conversations 15.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. And I will make sure to have that code and links to all the things you mentioned in the show notes for this episode, which you can find at humilityanddoxology.com. Those of you who are listening, thank you so much. I think this is going to be the final regular season episode of season 9. I am so glad you have joined me for all of these encouraging chats this year. I have been blessed and encouraged, and I hope you have been as well. I would love it if you would take a moment to share the podcast with a friend and leave a rating and review and subscribe wherever you're listening. Really is a helpful way, something simple you can do. It doesn't cost you a thing, and it helps make sure other homeschool parents can find the encouragement in their earbuds just like you have. Lyndsey, it was really nice to meet you today, and thanks so much for chatting.
Thanks, Amy. Bye-bye.